So we're picking up in this video with cities and demographics. And I just want to give a general note about the global population growth and movement during this time period. In general, population growth is a result and a cause of social change. From 1000 to 1700 CE, the European population tripled. In Africa, around the same time, the slave trade reduced the population. An increase in slavery resulted from the need for lots and lots of labor in tropical and subtropical regions of the New World. Now, later on, when Africans had gotten a hold of American crops, the population continued to grow despite slavery. We've talked about the American Indian population that was completely decimated, 90% wiped out by diseases, famine, and warfare. And then later on down the road in 1820 and really until about 1930, Europeans began to flood the outside world. And European growth was the fastest and most widespread in history with colonization, pretty much. So that brings us to our topic for today, cities and demographics. Studies of population movement usually analyze movement from urban areas to rural areas and vice versa. With urban, think cities. With rural, think countryside. Because cities serve as centers of government and economic production, trade, art, culture, migration into cities tell us something about the transformation of society. And capitals of strong states attract large and vibrant populations. And so in this, we're going to look at 4 very strong capitals. And the first one is Delhi, or what we know as Delhi, India. So each Mughal emperor, and the Mughals were the Mongols and the Turks who came into India and built the Mughal Empire. So each Mughal emperor built his own capital city. And Akbar's grandson rebuilt Delhi and named it Shahjahanabad. I think that's right, Shahjahanabad. And the population reached 2 million people. It was built in this semicircle with a radius of 10 to 12 miles, and it was a powerful religious, military, and administrative center. Not center. But it was a place of pilgrimage where people came to look at the tombs of the saints and the holy men. It housed an assembly of military camps, each under the leadership of a general. And of course, the emperor in this time stayed with the troops. And when Aurangzeb left, we talked about him, how he was a terrible Mughal emperor, and his reign led to the decline of Mughal India. When he left, the city was left deserted, pretty much. Okay, so Isfahan, the capital of Iran, this became the capital in 1598 by Shah Abbas, and I think we mentioned him in the last video. The Shah, again, is the title of, it would be like calling him King Abbas or Sultan Abbas, but Shah Abbas, it became his capital in 1598. It was one of the largest and most beautiful cities of the time, and it had 2.5-mile walkway and a really large public square, and it housed about 500,000 people. The center of the city had shops, it had the royal palace, it had a polo field, and meeting places. And it was a major center for craftsmanship. Shah Abbas welcomed merchants and craftsmen from all around the world because he wanted diversified goods. Shah Abbas did oppose the Ottomans, but he tolerated European religious groups. Because Shah Abbas had powerful neighbors on the outskirts of his empire or on the outsides of, Iran. He built a strong military so that he could protect them from outside invasion. He did maintain absolute control, and he brought in soldiers who were completely and totally loyal to him. So that brings us to Constantinople / Istanbul. It was Constantinople when Constantine built it as the capital city of the Eastern Empire, and then Istanbul once it was overtaken by the Ottoman Turks. Same place. So Constantinople, that was the Byzantine or the Eastern Roman Empire, and then Istanbul, what it was called under the Ottomans. So this had been the capital of a much reduced Byzantine Empire, and again became the capital of the Ottomans. It had a population of about 700,000 by 1600, and they had 3 major segments and enormous suburbs on the outskirts of the city. And this type of city is called a conurbation. It had 3 parts to it. It had a government center with promenades, mosques, gardens, trees, fountains, that type of thing. It had the Sarai, which is where the government officials lived. And then it had what was called the Golden Horn. And this was where the ports were and commercial establishments. So this is where trade happened. Istanbul has been called the prototype of later European capitals. It was the center of new ideas. It was the center of innovations. And eventually, Istanbul became the economic backwater with the shift of trade to the Atlantic. And then that leaves us with London, which of course goes with England. London began to grow as these other 3 cities began to began to decline. And that was around 1700 when London experienced lots of growth. And this was because of economic factors. The growth of London promoted the national market. It stimulated agricultural production. They had figured out how to use coal as a power source for the steam engine, which of course would replace water power. So new factories sprung up, which were based on coal power. They created new commercial instruments, increased productivity, and because they increased productivity, they were making more money, they could buy more things, so they had purchasing power. High immigration and death rates did keep the English population growth low, but London's growth stimulated new ideas. And there were new ideas about economics and the importance of economics. For instance, Londoners placed an increasing value on consumption and production for the commoner. And they encouraged lots of entrepreneurship throughout the country. So they were encouraging people to start businesses. And this is why people were coming from all over to live in London. Just to throw a statistic at you, in 1650, London held 7% of England's total population. In 1750, it was 11% of England's total population. And it also accounts for 8,000 people a year migrating to London by the end of the 1600s. So this is really just a reflection of their powerful economic practices. And we will bring our cities and demographics video to an end. And this concludes chapter 15. So we'll pick up in chapter 16 with political revolutions in Europe and the Americas.